So last year I made a video. It's called, I think, how much water treatment is too much water treatment, something like that, or how much 8-way is too much. And I was using Rector Seal 8-way product to treat the water in my steam boiler. This is a Peerless 63-03L, the smallest Peerless boiler that exists. And when I ended that video, I basically kind of gave up adding 8-way to it, because no matter how much I added, it still kept running fine. So I'm going to now see how much Squick is too much Squick. So I've never used Squick before. I don't know that much about it. I'll look at the ingredient list and see how it compares to 8-way. But I suspect there's a lot of similarities. But Squick comes in a powder, and they say dump the bottle of dry powder directly into the boiler. Well, I don't really have an easy way to do that. So what I'll probably do is I'll mix up the Squick in a little bit of water in a small container, and then I'll pour it here into my skim tapping that I have set up right here. This is how I add things to my boiler. So that's the plan. So right now we're looking at the control, I guess. So here it is firing. This meter, this Magnehelic, is inches of water pressure, or inches of water column, I should say. Sorry. And you can see that when it's normally firing here, and this is even on a little bit of a longer call for heat, it sits at right around 1 inch. And I think there's like 27 inches of water column. That would be equivalent to 1 psi. So this is like this is 1/25th or 1/27th of a psi of pressure. So that's pretty good. I mean, my system is sized pretty nicely. I think I even have a radiator that's turned off right now in my storage bedroom that I use for storage upstairs. And then if we look here, we can see this is really dry steam. There's not even occasional droplets that I'm seeing here in the risers. These are 2-inch risers, and the Peerless boiler just performs really good. It doesn't throw up any water at all if it's got good quality water in it, if there's no oils in it or anything like that. You can see my other videos where I purposely put some oil in this boiler, and it started throwing water immediately up into the risers. And then after the risers, I've got this drop header, and then here's another sight glass that I have on the riser that goes up to the main. So I have a single 2-inch main. My total EDR, my total radiation in this house is around 200, like maybe a little bit less with that one radiator turned off. And that's a pretty good match for this boiler. I think this boiler is still slightly oversized. Let's see. A net down there toward the bottom, it says net 233. So that's the square feet of steam that this can supply. So like I said, I'm around 200. It's sized for 233, so it's fine. Let's also take a look at what the pH is. So there's the color of my pH test strip. Autofocus is not working. And if I look at that, it's probably, and it looks like it's like somewhere between 9 and 10. Okay, cut to draining the boiler. drained the boiler of the water I had in it, which contained 8-way and was about pH 10 or 9 or something like that. And I drained it and I refilled it slowly with new water. And so now there's clear water in my boiler. And I was gonna put the Squick. I was gonna record a segment where I put the Squick in the boiler. But then prior to that, I was looking up the Squick patent, and I went to their website first, and it's Silver King Manufacturing, and they have a website that looks like it's from about 1994, and which is fine, whatever. But it had very little instructions or none, and it had no contents of what the product is, and it had no MSDS showing what it was. On the container, there's a little bit of instructions. I'll read them. They say, shut boiler down, remove safety valve, and pour Squick through a funnel into boiler dry. Replace valve and fire boiler. Absorbed impurities sink to the bottom as soft sludge and may be drawn off. Do not surface blow. Surface blow, I think they must mean skim. Or drain the boiler. So I guess they mean don't fully drain the boiler, but they do say draw off. That means, let some water come out of the boiler, which I guess is going to carry this soft sludge that they talk about. And it says water will clear. And it says use 1 5-ounce can for each 150,000 BTUs of boiler rating. So on my boiler, it's about half a can is what I'm going to be using. But when I went to their patent, which I have here on Google Patents, it was patented in 1963, which means all this information is freely usable by any manufacturer now. I am not a lawyer. But in 1963, it was filed by Norman Summers. It was granted in 1966, published at that same time. It expired in about 1983, 1984, and it is currently expired. Expired lifetime. I don't know what that means, but anyway, it's definitely expired. And when I was reading the patent, that had a lot more information in it about all the different ways that they expected this product to be used. And I want to go over a few of those because it changed my mind about this experiment I wanted to run in this video. So initially, I was just going to use Squick as a water treatment, which as you'll see is kind of one of the uses that they claim. And so I wanted to see how it acted in my boiler as a treatment. But one of the uses of Squick, and I knew this, but I forgot it, and I saw it again in the patent here, is they say you can use Squick as an alternative to skimming the boiler, is how I read it. So when you install a new boiler or when you do work on a boiler by adding new piping to it, that's going to introduce oil into your system. The condensing and the flow of the condensate is going to carry that oil down into the boiler, where it will pretty much remain. Only steam leaves the boiler in most cases when it's running correctly. So the oil is going to be in the boiler. Now, what's wrong with oil in the boiler is it affects the production of steam. It makes the steam, it makes the water boil in a weird way. You can repeat this on the stovetop with an old pan, and if you put some oil in it, and I'm talking about, petroleum oil. I don't know. I don't think the same thing would apply with vegetable oil, but I could try that someday in my boiler too, but I digress. So you put some petroleum oil in a pan, and you'll see it changes the way the water boils. And and definitely in a boiler, this has an effect. And you can see my other video where I where I purposely squirted some oil into my boiler and then watched it run, and it immediately started carrying water up into the risers, which I can see because I have those sight glasses on my risers. So anyway, Squick says one of the uses is an alternative to what they call, what do they call it? I'll read it soon enough, but they call it blowing off or something like that. It's an alternative to what I think they mean is skimming, where you raise the water level in your boiler up to a high point, a relatively high point in the boiler, where most manufacturers provide a skim tapping, and you slowly let water come into the boiler using the make-up water valve, and over a couple hours or a few hours or until the oil is gone, you allow that water to slowly pour out of that skim tapping, and because the oil sits on top of the water, it gets carried out over the course of a few hours. And you can't just drain your boiler, because the common comparison is a dirty bathtub, right? If you have a dirty bathtub and you drain it, all the dirt and gunk remains on the side of the tub. And then if you refill the tub, all the gunk is now floating in the water again, right, if it's oily. So same thing in a boiler. If you just drain an oily boiler, a lot of the oil, some of it's going to escape, but a lot of the oil is going to remain stuck to the side of the boiler as the water lowers inside the boiler. It leaves a film of oil, and then when you refill the boiler, it's got the oil still in it, so you still have your same problem. So skimming is the answer to that. Very well known in the steam boiler industry, right? By people who still know anything about steam. So Squick says they have an alternative to that. So let's look at this. Here they start talking about that they are offering a product which allows the use of, cleaning the boiler without taking the boiler off stream, they say it, right? So they say conventionally you'd have to remove the boiler blow-off plug, which I don't know, is that what they called it in 1963? It's a skim tapping today. Fitting piping into the boiler, firing the boiler, and adding water repeatedly in sufficient quantities to allow the surface oil, grease, and other impurities to run off. So that's what we call skimming today. And then following the surface blow-off, cleaning agents are then added to the boiler later, or water rather, and the boiler is fired for a number of hours, then drained and refilled, and a corrosion inhibitor may be added. So this is what they're saying is the old school way to do it, right? Then they say this invention, you don't have to blow off the surface oil and grease, and you also don't have to drain the boiler. They're saying when you install a new boiler to bring it online, you just run it, pour some Squick in it, and, I'll read specifically here in a minute, but run some Squick in it, drain off they say Squick captures all these bad things, the oil and other impurities, and it captures them and makes them fall to the bottom of the boiler, where they settle as a soft sludge that you can easily just drain off the bottom of the boiler using the drain port. So that's what they think. Now here we get into some of the ingredients, and I don't think they're saying exactly what the ingredients are in the patent, but they're giving an idea here. So 83 to 93% diatomaceous earth, if that's how to say it, which is, what is it? I don't even know. Oh, I should have looked up the whole thing. Let's see what it tells me. Oh, this is good. Containing or relating to diatoms. All right, that's great. Let's try this and see if it'll look it up for me. I can hop on Google if I need to. Yeah, why not? All right. Okay, so you can just buy the stuff. Oh yeah, good old Wikipedia. So diatomaceous earth, is that how you say it? It's a natural occurring siliceous, so sand-based sedimentary rock that's a white to off-white powder, and that is what Squick looks like, which you'll see later. Um, it has a low density, porosity, blah, blah, blah. It's fossilized remains of diatoms, a hard-shelled protist. So it's some kind of hard-shelled creature, I guess. It's used as a filtration aid, mild abrasive, an absorbent for liquids, a matting agent for coatings. You can see it's for cat litter, an activator in blood clotting. So it's basically like a thickener and it soaks stuff up. That's what it seems like to me. I'm not going to get too far into it, but that's what that is. So I think that's the material that they're thinking is going to bind with or encapsulate the oils and let them fall down to the bottom of the boiler. They also include a 4 to 9 weight% of anhydrous sodium sulfite. I'm not a chemist, so I don't really know what that is. 1 to 2. I can't read. I don't know what they're trying to say there. 1 to 2.5 maybe weight% of anti-foaming silicone. So anti-foaming agent. So that that's to fight the foaming that can cause carryover. But if their encapsulation process is working, why would they need an anti-foaming agent? I don't know. It's just a little good measure there. Preferably, although not necessarily, about 2 to 4 weight% of tannic acid should be present in the composition. I don't know why. And about 3 weight%. Optimally about 3 weight% of tannic acid. I say the same thing twice here. I don't know. Okay, yeah, they want 3% tannic acid by weight. Oh, there's the total percent. So I don't know. It's like they say in multiple different ways. Some lawyer was paid by the word to write this. So it says it's going to be in the water. Okay, so here you go. Within a period of 30 minutes, oil and grease impurities are removed from the surface and a suspension precipitates or falls down to the bottom of the boiler where it is drawn off as sludge. All right. Look at they're specifying a particular type of diatomaceous earth by the Johns Mansville Sales Corporation. Okay. He likes that brand, probably his cousin. Okay, yes, he says it absorbs the oil and grease and rust and scale from the boiler water. So he also says it grabs a hold of the rust and scale that might be present. So I guess that would be for an older boiler. And that's an interesting point. My boiler does not have significant rust or scale because it's pretty new and because I have it treated all the time with that higher level pH that I mentioned before. So sludge is what after a half hour. So when I read that, I thought, okay, well, I'm going to change my experiment. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put oil into the boiler. I'm going to show it surging with the oil, and then I'm going to put the Squick in it, and I'm going to see if it does encapsulate and cause the oil to precipitate to the bottom of the boiler. I think I'm going to do that experiment. So that's why I had this little timeout here where I talked about this. Oh, okay. Let's see what else. I'm going to make sure not to miss anything important in here. So here he talks about his preferred anti-foam silicone. So that's fine. I assume his company or whatever, if he worked for this company or if he owned it, I don't know, but I assume the company's still using this anti-foam silicone. I forgot to fill in how many grams, or Google didn't scan it properly, so he doesn't say how many grams should be utilized for each 700 feet of boiler rating. It's interesting. He uses boiler rating in feet here in the patent, but in the can they talk about 150,000 BTU. So I know that 150,000 BTU is about 400 square feet. So too bad it doesn't say how many grams here, but anyway, I'll just go with what the current product says on it, not what the ancient patent listing says. It says you can clean the boiler without taking the boiler off stream, which offline, I guess, is what, out of service is what I would call it today. And in particular about the necessary of the blow off, which again I think is skimming. Just repeating myself here, but so are they. It's not my fault. Oh, the boiler cleaner composition of the present invention may be blended by dry powder blending, with the liquid anti-foam silicone being mixed with the remaining components. And in its blended form may be stored indefinitely in metal containers. Now, I think they used to ship this in a metal can. Now it's in a plastic container. But they always are talking about can on their documentation. So I think it used to be in a metal can. Now, does that mean I can't mix it with water to pour it in my boiler? Because I don't have a good way to pour a dry powder into my boiler. Or do I? Oh, you know what? I do. Okay. I don't want to ruin the experiment by not following their instructions. Even though the dry powder immediately falls into the boiler water, they say specifically to put the dry powder in the boiler. So maybe the dry powder spreads out over the surface of the oily water. So yeah, I looking at my boiler now, I do have a way I can drop this dry powder in there. So I'm gonna try that. So this is exciting. Oh, here's his claims. Okay, he's restating everything all over again in the claims section. That's the way it works with patents. They say the same thing many times. So, oh, here's the other patents he named for these other products that he used. And yeah, so all right. Oh yeah, similar documents. Okay, whatever. So that's the story. So sorry for this long rambling part. I ramble when I make videos. I don't have a script. And but I'm going to do the following. I'm going to put oil in the boiler. I'm going to show you what happens when you put oil in the boiler. Then I'm going to follow directions and dump the Squick as a dry powder into my boiler. Then I'm going to run the boiler for a half hour, like they say. And then we're going to see, after that half hour, I guess I'll let it sit for a while, and then we'll see if it helps the surging that the boiler caused in my boiler. So, all right, let's get this started. All right, so I cranked up the boiler. I heated up my fresh, cold, clear water, and it's currently steaming. Here we are at our 1 inch of water column or less. Here's the here's the dry steam being produced. It's invisible. All right, that's good. And so, as I mentioned, I'm going to now poison my boiler water with some oil. I forget exactly what this oil is. It's either cutting oil or it's just some motor oil that I have around my basement. So I'm going to squirt. How many squirts? Like 1, 2, 3, 4 squirts, let's say. And then we're steaming right now, so oops, my hand is all oily. We're steaming right now, so I'm gonna open up this. There's some steam coming out, trying to burn myself. Pour some water. I got some warm water here to pour to just wash the oil into the boiler, right? So about a quart of warm water to wash that oil down into the boiler, and I can close my skim valve, and we'll see how quickly. I'm looking for something to wipe my oily hand off with. We'll see how quickly the steam gets wet. If it does, I might have to, who knows, I might have to add more oil. Okay, I've done a total of 16 squirts of oil into my boiler now. And we can tell by my nice meter here, this is a very low pressure range meter, that we now are bouncing around quite a bit more, and we're at 2 inches of water instead of 1. So that tells me the boiling or the steam production is being affected. And if I open up my skim tap here, if you recall before, just a nice gentle amount of steam was coming out of it, you know, nothing else. Now if I open it, we can see, look, I can't even leave it open because it's spilling water into my basement. Whoa, yeah, the boiling is much more turbulent, I guess. It's very much less clean steam production is kind of how I would say it. So, and if we look at my risers again, this one I guess I can see down into pretty well. Now we can see this is what I would call wet steam. You know, it's certainly wetter than it was before. Before there was not a single drop could be seen in this riser. Now you can see these droplets getting splashed up into the risers. Here we go. So that last few squirts of oil, I guess, has made its way into the boiler now, and here we go. So now we can see some wet steam. And this is not new. I had the other video that showed this, but this is wet steam starting to become apparent, and now it's yeah. So this is what you don't want to have happen in your boiler. Oh, this is great. Now we're getting some real good production of not carryover yet because it's splashing up into the risers, but as it goes around these corners of the drop header, the pipe is going to catch that water, and it's going to carry it down this way to the equalizer, and it's going to carry that splashed up water back down to the boiler until it's so bad that the water is making an appearance up here at the actual, you know, the second riser that comes off of or third riser that comes off of the header. That's when you actually have, you know, wet steam entering the system. Now you could argue, you could say, all right, well, now we look. Considering this is happening on your steam risers, surely the steam itself must be wetter when it's up here going into the system. And that could be, you know, it could be that this is putting a lot of small droplets or just humidity into the steam, and it's making the steam wet. I don't know what the true definition of wet steam is. I mean, this is obviously grotesquely wet steam here. This is, you know, steam carrying up boiling water, and I think a lot of people's boilers are doing this. Every time they fire it, you know, if you see a bouncing water line, and look, this water line's barely even bouncing, right? That's well under ½ inch of bouncing. Those gradations are 1 quart of water in my boiler. They're not inch marks, but those tick marks are maybe 3/8 of an inch each. So we have less than ½ inch of bounce here. So who would consider that to be, you know, a lot of surging? Probably no one. But if you could look in the pipes and see this, would you think that's surging? And now the oil is starting to really have an effect, and we see splashing happening up here into the main now. So I think we're at the place where I'll shut down the boiler right now, and I'll let the boiling settle down. Look at it, it's amazing. So this is oil. This is 16 squirts of cutting oil. I think it's cutting oil into your boiler. We'll let this settle down and cool off a little bit, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this sight glass. This fitting is called a what is it called? A tri-clamp fitting. It's used in brewing a lot at breweries, and in chemical production. And I'm using it so I can see my steam quality. And so if I remove this sight glass, which will come off so easy, I just have to untwist these tri-clamps. Then I'm going to pour 2.5 ounces of Squick powder into my boiler, and we're going to see if then it will encapsulate and cause the oil to precipitate out of the boiler, of the surface of the boiler water, and form a soft sludge at the bottom of the boiler, as the patent says it will. So stay tuned. Okay, that wasn't so bad. I was able to remove this left riser's sight glass. I don't know if you can see, but there's still some, it's not steam because I can see it, but there's still some condensed water vapor coming out of the boiler. It's just a couple of minutes since I turned it off. And so here's the Squick. So I know they said use a funnel, but ow, it's a little bit hot still coming out of there. We'll just gently put in the prescribed amount. Ouch, that is hot. Once burned, not learned. Okay, so there's that. Got a little extra on the top there. I'll brush that in. It's very friable. I don't know if that's the right word for this stuff, but it's very light powder. It really will blow around if you disturb it. So I've dumped it directly now into the boiler. So it's a little dark on this side, but these are my vertical risers on this boiler. They go directly into the boiler. Now I don't know how I would be expected to pour Squick as a powder into my boiler if I didn't have this, because I showed you my skim tapping already. That the powder would have to go down the skim tapping and around a corner and go into the boiler. I couldn't do that without washing it down into there with water. Sometimes people add things in their boiler using the port for the high pressure relief valve, or the PRV, pressure relief valve. And mine is mounted on the side. Some boilers have it coming out of the top. Mine's on the side. That's where Peerless put it. And so I have an elbow. I could remove this valve and dump it here into the elbow, but then what's it going to do? It's just going to sit there. I'd have to wash it down into the boiler. So I don't know. They don't say how to pour a powder into your boiler. But I was able to use my sight glass. So I'll put this back together and then fire the boiler up and we'll see what happens. Alright, I got that back in place. That sight glass, it doesn't go back super easy, but I was able to get it back on there. And I can turn the boiler back on, and we can see it come to a boil again and see how it behaves now that I've put that one half can of Squick. It's gone in there. Now there was a little bit of Squick remaining in my container, and let's look at what happens. I put a little water in with it. You can see that the powder floats on the surface for sure. Initially, it doesn't want to mix with the water. Now, no doubt, eventually, I'm sure it will, but this may be why they want you to pour the Squick directly into the boiler dry, to ensure that it will spend maybe some time at the surface, maybe soaking up some of the oil that's there. That's just a guess. I don't know enough about, I can't remember how it's pronounced or how it's spelled, diatomaceous earth, to know if its effects should work even after it's, fully. Eventually, it's got to get fully mixed with the water, I would think. I don't think it will stay on the surface the whole time, but this is staying on the surface of this little container, so that's pretty good. So maybe it's going to encapsulate the oil and bond with the oil. Maybe the oil will be able to, I don't know the right words. I didn't study chemistry, so I don't know the right words for when the oil sort of bonds with a dry substance, or wicks into this dry substance, these particles. But maybe that's what's gonna happen. So it says to give it a half hour. As I'm recording this now, it's 1:35. That's when I started the boiler back up. So we are still seeing the rougher boiling that was occurring, from the oil, where it shows a pressure of 3 inches of water, and that the rough boiling, it does manifest as sort of a higher pressure at the boiler. Oh, this is interesting. Now it's not too much light on this side, I'm afraid, but here we can see that some of the powder material has deposited onto the inner surface of my sight glass here, and to a lesser extent on the sight glass that I did not use to put the powder into the boiler. I can see some of the like in this area, this stuff here is stuck to the side of the glass. You can see a little bit of condensation. I'll try to hold this steady for you. You can see a little bit of condensation coming down the glass. That's just from the steam that's, condensing on my near boiler piping. And it's coming down and it's bringing some of the particles back down with it. So that's kind of interesting. It's like the powder seems to be, so far, like it's on the surface because it got thrown up. It got thrown up briefly into this section of the pipe. Now, I was seeing water getting thrown up on this burn cycle a couple minutes ago, but now I don't see it. So it does indicate that something's happening. So whether it's grabbing the oil and successfully causing it to, it's either grabbing it and separating it so it's no longer coating the water's surface, causing as much of a boiling problem, or maybe it's started to actually precipitate some of this oil down to the bottom. Now I can't imagine during an actual heating cycle that it would that it would precipitate you know, down to the bottom. The boiling starts at the bottom where the flame is. So the bubbles are formed at the bottom of the boiling what's the word? The boiler container itself. And that's gonna swirl everything around, you know. So I would suspect that if this encapsulation does occur, that those pieces, those encapsulated pieces that form, they're going to be swirled around in the boiler. And then once this boiling cycle stops, according to the instructions, after half an hour, you can stop boiling, and then that's when these encapsulated oil particles and the diatomaceous sorry for the pronunciation, the earth product that they have in here, the combination of those will precipitate down to the bottom and form that soft sludge they referred to. So my plan is I'll let this fire for 30 minutes, and then I'll let it I'll turn down my thermostat or turn off the boiler and let it settle out, maybe for another half hour to an hour, something like that, and then we'll see if something does come out of the if any soft sludge does come out of the bottom of the boiler. So that's next. All right, while I wait for some more boiling time to pass by, and it has been about I guess it's been about 15 or 20 minutes. And just to show real quick, look at that. The boiling is been returned to its previous level of happiness, I guess. The pressure is reading what it was reading with just water in the boiler, and we can see that there's no, you know, no surging happening here according to the gauge glass. It's bouncing, I don't know, a quarter of an inch max. So that's pretty good for starters. But while I wait for the prescribed half hour to go by, I thought, I wonder if I could see this happen on the bench here. So I've got my oil, and I have some warm water, and if I put like a couple squirts of oil in the water, well, that's pretty good. You can really see it. So there's the oil. It wants to collect to itself just like a lava light would, and it also collects to the side. And so, forgive the lighting here. So there it is. Of course, oil's not mixing with the water, and if this were a boiling action, you know, the oil would be spread out over the surface. And I don't have a picture to show you of this in action, but we know that the boiling becomes very violent, and splashes a lot more than it would without the oil there. So I've got a little bit of the Squick here in the cap. So what if I put this in, and pretend this is my boiler, and you know, ideally I would do this on the stove top and I would have it be boiling. I don't really want to do that. Sorry, the light situation is not great. But if I took my stir stick and stirred this around, maybe we can see what happens. Now I can already see, just in the water, the Squick remains very dry, but with the oil, you can see these little brown or orange pieces are starting to form. And I believe that's where the squick is interacting with the oil to make these little brown shapes. These did not appear before when I had just water in this container, when I was swirling the squick around. And if I look, I should have a clear container, but I don't. But let's see. There, we can see that there is what I would call encapsulation, or a combining of what must be the squick with the oil, and it's making these chunks. And they are already less buoyant than just the oil was. You can see that they are already starting to, I gotta say, they're starting to precipitate out of the water. So look at that. That is pretty cool. And some of them are settling all the way to the bottom. So, so just for fun here, again, I'll put the timings of all this stuff in the video, because this video is getting long. I'll put the timings in the description so you can skip ahead or past this garbage if you want to. But if I just continue to agitate this, and I have no idea about the relative quantities of the squick, that I just dropped into this container compared to how much oil I put in. But if I see there's still oil on the top, I'll add some more squick. In fact, I know that I'm going to add a little bit more, because right now you can see some of the sludge on the side here, and I suspect that there's still more oil to be encapsulated, because otherwise there would be dry squick still on the surface, and there's really not any of that left. So let me take a little bit more. Another, I have no idea, half gram, whatever that is, and start to agitate that a little bit, as long as I'm just burning time waiting for the boiler to finish its half hour. So it really is. Now see this, it's forming on the side. It gets splashed up and it wants to form on the side. And then if I agitate it directly with my stick, it breaks free and then floats downward. But it definitely is like stuck to the sides a little bit. So I'm a little nervous for my boiler to have this garbage like stuck on its interior. But in fact, there's an old post on Heating Help Forum, which I'll link to that in the description as well, where people had made a claim that this squick would create this sort of solid coating that would go to the bottom, primarily go to the bottom of the boiler, and then would sort of hard set there, like some kind of hard substance on the bottom of the boiler. And they claimed that there was a boiler manufacturer that had warned against using squick. And Dan had replied, I'm going to add some more squick. Dan had said, well, what manufacturer was this? He wanted to know what manufacturer said don't use squick, because I don't think he had ever seen such a warning from a manufacturer, and he wanted to find out if it was real. And I didn't see any response. So he recommended to people who were asking him on that thread, he said, well, I would say use it as directed if you want to use it. And it seemed like he didn't believe there was any harm that would come from it. So based on this, I'm not too really scared for the health of my boiler if there's a little bit of coating of something on there. And I suspect that this would remain in a soft sludge consistency, given that there's water sloshing around, hot water sloshing around in that boiler all the time when it's running. You know, if you drained the boiler and let it dry out, I could imagine this substance would get quite a bit harder and maybe you wouldn't want to come off. But I think during normal boiler operation, it's going to remain in this soft sludge state, which is a good description of what I'm seeing here on the sides of the container. And I think over time that would break free and then it would precipitate, to use their word. Now this is good. Now this is interesting. So the Squick that I've added now this last time seems to be enough to have overtaken any of the oil, because what you see is actual sort of dry pieces of Squick are bouncing around on the surface here. So the surface tension of the water holds up these little pieces of Squick. Look at them. Do you see them? These little balls? And they're just rolling around. And so it's like they have no more oil to bond with. All the oil has been encapsulated, I would say, in my container. And if we look down here again, what can we see? We see the pieces floating around. Quite a few of them are toward the bottom. Some are still suspended. And, you know, like I said before, during boiling, I would expect them to, some or all of them would go into suspension. They would bounce around. They're not just going to sit on the bottom while there's boiling happening, in my mind. So this is kind of cool. I have to say, it kind of looks like it's worked. And if I look again at the boiler, and we're coming up on our half hour of boiling time. But if we look at the boiler, that's looking just like it looked with pure water, and just like it looked with my normal 8-way treatment in there, right around an inch of water column. And if we look here at the gauge glass, still everything looks fine. Now here's the cloudiness they were talking about, that Squick was talking about. They said the cloudiness, the water will clear in time. So if I empty out just a little bit here, just so it gets refilled by the boiler water, we can get an idea of what's happening in the boiler. And I would say there is some cloudiness, but I don't have any reason to doubt that it will clear in time. So let's, I'm going to go ahead and stop the boiler now, and then I'll stop the video, and I'll come back in a half hour to hour, and we'll see then what comes out. We'll see what comes out of the drain at that time, if we can see any of the sludge get pulled off of there. But I'm kind of not really. I guess I'm impressed a little bit. It seems like it did what they said. It did. It combined with the oil, and the oil's no longer on the surface. And the little pieces, I have no doubt they're eventually going to make their way to the bottom. They had already started to in my little experimental container. So there you go. So, all right, I'm going to turn off the boiler, let the house cool off too, and I'll be back in probably an hour, and we'll draw off some of this water and see if some sludge comes with it. All right, it's a half hour later since I shut down the boiler, and I was looking at my container here. we see the remaining I call it, what do I call it? Uh, unused or extra squick still here at the top. And we do see at the, here's my stick here. We do see at the bottom, if I stir this up a little bit, we see that the pieces have come to the bottom. They've precipitated out. This is the combined, what I suspect is the combined oil with Squick on it, and it has settled to the bottom of my test container here. So I have my my pretty clean bucket here. Let's see what comes out of the boiler now. I'm pretty sure some of this is going to come out. Let's see. All right. Well, what do we have in there? It's funny. It's maybe it has also combined with some of the rust that might have been in the boiler, because it's definitely like it's less transparent than my test container water. That's interesting. Let's go over to the sink. My basement is a mess, but let's go over to the sink. I'll try not to burn myself with this one-handed bucket operation here. Let's see what we can see as we pour it out of the bucket here. I'm not seeing the chunks, really. But maybe the action of the boiling makes the chunks become a lot smaller or not even visible. Oh, here's some of them. Look at here. So down in the bottom, there are some of the little chunks. I can tell by the way they move in the water. They're the same, density or mass as the chunks that were in my test bucket right here in this little puddle of water. These ones. So those I think precipitated out. Then there is a little bit of rust, heavier rust pieces or flakes at the bottom here. So let's rinse that out and grab another. Let's grab another bucket. I know I'm gonna spill this, so let me set it over here. All right. Let's grab another bucket full of this. Drain off, or whatever they called it in the instructions. And I like it to flow with some speed so that it, has a chance to carry some of the pieces out with it. So let's see again what we get here. I'll pour this out gently. It's a brownish kind of light purple color. And it's funny, Squick is not the thing that I thought it was. When people have talked about Squick, I could have swore it was this bright yellow green color that it made their boiler water. But that's not what's happening here. Okay, there's another couple pieces of, I forget the word for the combined, I guess we'll say precipitated chunks. And you can see the heavier, it's like panning for gold. You see the heavier rust or metal pieces, they stay behind, and the other pieces are carried by the water. Those are the pieces of oil and Squick. I'm going to do one more bucket, so it's not too boring. But we're down here. I've taken out, you can see I've taken out like 1.5 gallons. Each of these is a quart, so I was up to here. So I'm going to take out another 1/2 or 3/4 of a gallon. All right. Now they say on the instructions you don't have to drain the boiler, and I could see that because the amount of material I'm getting out. Right now, it's not like a lot of this soft sludge coming out. Like those little light pieces, I think, are what I would call the light soft sludge that's coming out. And there's just not that much of it. It wouldn't bother me if that was floating around in my boiler. Now, I guess someone could say, oh, well, the rest of it is like stuck to the inside of your boiler right now and you're never going to get it out. I guess that's possible. Yeah, see this? This is just a few pieces, few small pieces of that precipitated out material remains, and just a little bit of rust now is coming out. So that rust, for all I mean, I drained a little bit of water out before I started this. But that rust could have been in there before, or maybe the Squick freed it up. So that's where I am now. So I'm not going to drain anymore. The instructions say you don't need to drain your boiler. So I've got a good 5 or 6 gallons of water remaining in my boiler here. I'm just going to leave it, and I may fill it back to here, the normal water level, and then just let it keep running for the rest of the day. And then this evening I might come in and revisit it and have a look. They said that the water would clear in time. So if I empty out, after I've had it running this evening for the rest of the day, we'll see what the water looks like. But it doesn't look too bad. It's a little bit foggy. And it's that sort of like brownish, a little bit purple color. Oh yeah, let me do this. I didn't do this yet. Sorry for the delay here, but I've got my litmus paper strips. I get these kind from Amazon. They're dirt cheap. And they seem pretty accurate. So let's see what the pH level is of this stuff. I meant to test that. All right. So it's basically, look, that's 7. To the right of the strip is the 7 color, and down here is the 6. So to me, it's just neutral. So I see that Squick is not affecting my pH at all. So I wouldn't personally use Squick for a long-term treatment. But after I come back and check the water later tonight or tomorrow, I'll have more to say about what I think about Squick. But right now, So far, it seems to have done what they said it would do, which is kind of pretty cool. I was very skeptical of it coming into this experiment, so turn back on the boiler and let it run with normal calls for heat until later tonight, and I'll come back and see how it looks over the next day or two probably, and then give a summary. Okay, it's a few hours later that I just left the boiler operating, and I thought we would take a look at this sample container here. It still has a little bit of floating squick on it, and the water itself has cleared up a little bit. It still has this sort of brown color to it, you can see here. But on the bottom, if I stir around a little bit here, we can see here's the soft sludge that's referred to in the patent, and in the instructions. This is the little fluffy chunks of, I guess, oil and squick that have combined to form this material here at the bottom. And it is soft. It's not hard in any way, but I could see where it would just sit there. It would settle into the low spots of the boiler, like the mud leg, right? I think it would settle into the low spots of the boiler, areas where there's not any boiling happening to stir it up. Any of it that settles where the boiling is occurring, those are good. That stuff's going to get circulated around, and eventually, what it does is it just like sediment, other sediment that's in the boiler, like rust and whatnot, and mud. It finds its way into these little crevices where it doesn't get stirred up by the boiling action. And that's what this stuff is probably going to do too. So I think it is going to be in my boiler for a while. I got my bucket emptied out here again. Let's drain some of this out now and see if any of it shows up in the bucket. All right, looking pretty brown still there. How about from the gauge glass here? Okay, it's about the same. It just looks like what's there in the gauge glass. So let's take it over again to the sink and see what came out this time. Now there is a little bit of a sheen on top of the water. This could be encapsulated bits of oil still floating. It's funny. It's floating here on this water. But where I drew it off of the boiler, it comes off the bottom, right? So something came off the bottom, but then it still wants to float. I don't think this was in the bucket. The bucket was pretty clean. So, might have come off of my stick too. So let's see what we see coming out of the bucket here. It's some of that sheen still. It's hot, that's for sure. Nothing too chunky yet showing up. Okay, it's the following day, and I was thinking about Squick all last night and today, and I've got a summary about it. The first thing is it works. I think it does what they say it will do. Um, but I don't think I would use it, and I don't think I would recommend it. Um, it says what they say it will do, which is it really did seem to encapsulate the oil. It almost immediately improved the production of the steam in my boiler that had oil in it. Um, and it does, that it does allow for the removal of oil from a boiler without skimming. All that is true. But there's a couple of problems I have with it. The first is skimming just works. Like the time when you need to skim, this is residential wise, okay? Primarily. The time you need to skim in a residential situation is when you install a new boiler. Very rarely you might do some work on your piping. I mean, I do a lot of work on my piping, but most people don't do any work on their piping at all. And so when you're doing a new boiler, I think you want the contractor to skim it. It kind of forces the contractor to be there watching it run for a while, and also it has to run. It has to run for, you want it to run for a week or two before they come back to skim it. So you get a guaranteed, if the contractor is doing things the right way, you get a guaranteed return where they get to talk to you about the performance of the boiler. You may have experienced some problems with the quality of the steam resulting in knocking or surging. But then that's going to get cleared out when they skim it, and then you'll be able to immediately see that improvement. And you'll know that your boiler is in good shape. And it gives the contractor a chance to see if there is any remaining issues with the boiler. They'll sit there and the boiler will be. They'll fire up the boiler. They'll get it warm. They'll skim it for a couple hours. That part's boring, but while they're down there, they'll be looking at it and seeing if there's anything that they maybe missed or want to revisit. So I like skimming for those reasons. As a homeowner who installed my own boiler, this one, the skimming was fantastic. It's super great for me because I live here. It's so easy to skim multiple times when you live with the boiler. And a homeowner even who doesn't install their own boiler, they can do a skimming operation if they're even a little bit handy. So skimming just works, and it's so easy. The other big problem with it is, and I thought about this while I was watching TV. A big thing they talk about in the patent is the ability to fix, to remove oil from the oil and other contaminants from the boiler without going off stream, in their words, right? Without taking the boiler offline. And I just don't see how that's possible. Even my boiler, which has the sight glass that I was able to remove within a couple minutes and then reinstall within a couple more minutes, I still had to take the boiler. I had to shut down the boiler to do that. And what are other people's options for pouring a dry powder into their boiler? They're not going to have the risers open like I have, or openable like I have. They may have a skim tapping, but I guess you could pour the powder in there and then wash it down with water. It would work okay, but you can't do that while the boiler's running. You have to take the boiler offline to do that. Skimming does take longer, right? So I guess if you could get it into the boiler and you absolutely couldn't allow the boiler to go offline because it was in some vital role in a it would have to be a commercial operation, because any residence can be without a boiler for a few hours. Uh, but if you get the powder in there and you absolutely needed to not take the boiler offline or to minimize the downtime, then okay, then I could say, all right, Squick is good for you. It's the thing that's gonna help you not have to spend an hour to 3 hours skimming. Um, it worked. There's no question. Now I don't think all of the encapsulated oil came out of my boiler when I was done. After I finished yesterday's video, I did go ahead and drain the boiler because I did want to get as much of that stuff out as possible. And I suspect some of it is on the interior walls of the boiling chamber, and some of it probably has settled into the low spots, of my boiler. But I'm not too worried about those. I'm not too worried about it. Whatever remaining amount is in my boiler. It was 2.5 ounces of powder, which is basically ground up seashells, apparently. So yeah, it works. That's that's the summary. It works, but why is kind of my forward summation of this product. It is cool. Grease, yes. Rust, maybe that's what the acid was to break free the rust. And then scale, yeah, maybe it breaks free the scale. Absorbs foam. It does have that defoaming agent in it, so yeah. Quickly removes oil. That's absolutely true. All that's true. But skimming takes care of all that. It's not a long-term like water treatment. I don't think I have to look again on their website. I should have looked before I did this summation because I can't remember now. But I don't think they consider it like a long-term treatment. They consider it a way to clear out, grease, rust, and scale. And so if I was having a boiler installed, knowing what I know now, I would ask the contractor not to use Squick. I would say just skim it traditionally, because I don't know what that material is going to do, and I know that skimming is just proven. Like it just works. You don't need anything. You just let the oils drain out, and it works great. That's I skimmed this boiler when I installed it, and everything went perfectly fine. And then you can decide whether you want to do a long-term treatment or not. I use 8-way to keep the pH level a little higher in my boiler. Like I've said, I'm sure around 10 or 11 is where I like to keep it. Squick doesn't affect the pH level. I saw that, and that's fine. If you liked a treatment, Squick's not for you. If you don't like a treatment, Squick's not for you. If you absolutely cannot skim your boiler, and you need to get rid of some oil that's in it, then yes, that's when Squick is for you. So that's in my mind, that's a very narrow set of possible customers. And on heatinghelp.com, not too long ago, someone said that their installer had put in or was going to put in 8 cans of Squick, or wanted the customer to put 8 cans of Squick in the boiler. That's outrageous. I would send that person packing. Like, do not come back to my house. I don't know where you get this idea about 8 cans of Squick. No one who's not some kind of steam manufacturing outfit should consider that much Squick. That's outrageous. I don't know where that came from. So that's it. That's the summary. It works. I'm shocked, but it works. But I don't think anyone needs it. So there you go. Stay tuned or whatever. sometime in the future, I'm going to do another video. I still have I still have just plain water in my boiler after having drained the Squick out, and I just drained it and then refilled it once. I didn't flush it out multiple times or anything. So I've got plain water, and so in my next video, I realized I have a can of Surgex on hand, a bottle of Surgex. This is a powder too, and I think this is the green stuff. This is the yellow green stuff. In the bottle, it's orange. Let's take a preview. Yeah, it looks yellow in this video, but it's orange. This light color is weird. It looks like Tang. So apparently it has a marker in it, a chemical marker, probably for pH level. And so I think I'll put some Surgex in my boiler next. I think it calls for. This is a 1.5 ounce bottle. I think it calls, oh yeah, 1 bottle per 600 square feet of radiation. So I have 200. So I'll be adding 1/3 of that bottle. And then maybe a little extra just for the video's sake. But that'll be next. I don't know when that'll be, but probably not too long, because I want to put some treatment in my boiler. So we'll try Surgex next. Thanks for watching. This video was too long, and I hope you took advantage of jumping around in the video and using the times that I had in the description, because I definitely talked too much. So have a good day, and thanks again.